Welcome to Manga's Seal YouTube channel. The previous video link is on the description box or on the top right card. Volume 13, The Paladin of the Holy Kingdom. Ainz had practiced this method of evading his opponent by closing in with them several hundred times with Cocytus. About 1 in every 10 times, if Cocytus was not attacking in earnest, he could completely slip past them. Cocytus did say that a good warrior would never make such incredibly flashy and telegraphed attacks, so I shouldn't get careless, but it's pretty useful in an actual fight, isn't it? And so, Ainz placed his bony hand on the evil lord's sturdy chest. And then he cast a touch spell. While most spells had an effective range, some spells had a range that was practically zero. Such spells needed direct contact with the target to be cast, so only people with levels in spellcaster and warrior classes could use them well. It was because they were so inconvenient that they were more powerful than spells of a similar tier, being roughly a tier more effective. Ainz's specialty was necromancy, and this was an 8th tier spell from that field, maximize magic, energy drain. It was a spell that drained the opponent's levels and granted various benefits, depending on the number of levels drained. Naturally, this spell had also been maximized. He beat the evil lord's spell resistance and drained his levels. Thanks to that, he recovered almost all the damage Yuri had inflicted. That said, the healing provided by this spell was only supplementary in nature. Ainz's parameters were all temporarily enhanced, and he received a special buff which would fade in a short time. In turn, the evil lord had received a level down debuff, which could not be removed by the passage of time. This time, it was the evil lord who backed away. His wrathful visage was tinted by something else. Was it surprise, or was it admiration? Ainz wanted to praise himself for successfully evading that blow too. That said, he had managed it because his opposition had been far too cocky. Just like how a magic trick became boring once you pointed out the gimmick, this move would probably not work a second time. Well, however good a plan is, only an idiot would use it more than once. Isn't that right, Pleiades? Overlord Omega. That was how it was. He was fighting 5 doppelgangers, the evil lord of wrath, and a level 100 NPC. Is Albedo trying to make me lose? I didn't think she'd even use Oriole. Overlord Omega was the lastborn of the Pleiades 7 sisters. She was an area guardian of the 8th floor, and a level 100 NPC specialized in commander-type classes. As a commander, she could issue orders which buffed her allies. CZ must have been able to beat their level difference thanks to that. While he had no idea what kind of special ability Oriole had used, if one looked at party roles such as physical attacker, magical attacker, healer and so on, then she would be a wild card and all-rounder. It was hardly strange that she would be able to do anything. What exactly could Pinito Mosan do? Ainz never went head-to-head with his opponents during PvP, so Ainz had little experience in dealing with commander-type opponents. She could not have left the 8th floor and come here without my permission. That would mean that she must have buffed the doppelgangers before they came here. That would mean she probably didn't buff them too carefully, or no, is there a doppelganger of Oriole here? No. There was no time to think about such pointless things. Only one thing mattered. Could they completely shut down Ainz's spellcasting, and could they keep it up forever? There were 2 kinds of special abilities in Yggdrasil. One kind had a cooldown period after use. The other had a limited number of uses within a certain period. There were also combinations of the two. In general, the more powerful the ability, the longer the cooldown or the fewer times it could be used. Ainz's trump card, the goal of all life is death, which could only be used once every 100 hours, was just such an ability. In that case, which type did CZ's ability to interrupt Ainz's spellcasting belong to? That move just now was very handy, but it did not seem to have a long cooldown time. That would mean it was the use-limited type. However, he could not tell how long it would take for her to recover her uses. All he could do was hope that she could not recover them during the course of the battle, after they were depleted. Though I think I ought to save my 10th tier spells for when they've been depleted. Ainz quickly verified the positions of the Pleiades and the evil lord. The evil lord was in front of him. Yuri was behind Ainz and preparing to slug him. While Hakai-enhanced attacks could even shatter steel, they were of little concern in the face of Ainz's levels. After reconfirming that the evil lord was the real danger, he turned his attention to the others. Intoma was inside a house on the left side of the square. Lopusargina was in the square. Solution stood in front of her, like she was protecting her. CZ's location was unknown. While not knowing a sniper's position was the worst possible scenario, the fact that the enemy was now dispersed was the best case for him. Ainz snorted. Though he knew that now was hardly a time to laugh, he could not resist the mirth welling up inside him. Now this is interesting. Alright, now get out of my face. Maximize magic, nuclear blast. Before Ainz's eyes, the space between him and the evil lord flashed and swelled, consuming everything in an instant. Yuri was surprised, but that was only to be expected, because Ainz had been caught in it as well. Using the 9th tier spell Nuclear Blast as an attack was a questionable choice. It did composite damage, half fire, half bludgeoning, and it was one of the weaker 9th tier spells in terms of damage. Considering the Evil Lord of Wrath was immune to fire, this spell should not have even been considered for use. Even so, Ainz had his reasons for using this spell. First of all, it had a very large area of effect. It was superior to almost all other spells in that respect. In addition, this spell also generated all kinds of negative status effects, such as poisoning, blindness, deafness, and so on, but anything of the Evil Lord's level would be able to resist it with their raw statistics alone, and the Pleiades equipment ought to have made them immune to all these effects. The main reason he had chosen this spell was because it also possessed a very powerful knockback effect. Of course, Ainz would also be damaged by this spell. While friendly fire was often Yggdrasil and so using a spell this recklessly would not be a problem, right now he would be hurting himself. Even if his magical defense was very high, there was no need for him to go out of the way to take damage to cast his spell. Rather than act like a suicide bomber, he ought to have chosen another spell. However, Ainz had already worked it out. If he expended the body of Effulgent Barrel spell to stop all the bludgeoning damage, the fire elemental damage would also be negated, which would mean he would not be harmed. In addition, all those negative statuses were ineffective on the undead. In other words, Ainz was undamaged by the spell. If he completely resisted its damage, the knockback would not take effect either, and so Ainz was the only one left standing in the heart of the explosion. Hahaha. Ainz laughed. The feeling of everything going as planned was very refreshing, after all. Ainz's aim was to blow the enemy away and tear the enemy formation to shreds. For a moment, Ainz briefly imagined the guild members who had taught him various things including this tactic. Both the earlier simulated battle and even this battle where failure meant death reminded Ainz of Yggdrasil, which made him strangely happy. I've wondered about this before, but I don't think I'm a battle maniac. Come, it's not over yet. The battle's just beginning. I'll show you the strength that I nurtured with everyone. Unleashing the fury of that 9th tier spell meant that the surrounding buildings had all been swept away, and there was much more space all of a sudden. That could not be helped. After all, this city had outlived its usefulness. He could have waited the spell to try and catch CZ in the blast. However, Ainz was worried about the problems that might result from destroying too much of the city, so he had not done so. For all he knew, it might have been a mistake. Forget it, let's leave it at that. What's left is. Ainz looked in Lepusargina's direction. The enemy envelopment was in shambles. Even with Oriel's buffs, they could not avoid the knockback, and Ainz could see the enemy hurriedly getting to their feet. That's about all the damage Nuclear Blast ought to be able to do, so. Ainz flew towards Lepusargina and cast Reality Slash. This time, he was not interrupted by CZ, and Lepusargina's body spurted a fountain of blood. White magic, Shark Cyclone. An extra large cyclone came into existence behind him, swallowing up Yuri and the Evil Lord. This was both to obscure Yuri and the Evil Lord's vision, and also to buy Ainz time. In truth, Ainz had planned to create a cyclone before the nuclear blast to block their vision, and then get rid of Yuri first, but after considering that the Evil Lord could probably break out of the spell easily, he decided not to go with that plan. Instead, he had decided to use it when the enemy was confused. Ainz heard the sound of displaced stones as he saw Antoma push a pillar off herself while rising to her feet. He had no idea where CZ was even now. Ideally, she would be pinned under a fallen house. He's coming here. Stop him. Solution shouted from her place in front of Lepusargina, but her voice could not reach the ears of Yuri and the Evil Lord, who were inside the cyclone. Yuri in particular was shifting desperately within the cyclone to avoid being blown away. While certain classes could use spells or special abilities to teleport or go incorporeal and thus escape the cyclone easily, she did not seem to possess such abilities. And that would mean Yuri had focused on strengthening other things. After reviewing this battle, they ought to understand what gear they need to have, and what preparations they need to make, right? No, that's not it. If they were the true Pleiades, they might have been able to deal with this better. They were simply doppelgangers copying the Pleiades' abilities, after all. It only made sense that they would lose out to the real deal in terms of combat skills. As Ainz closed the distance and prepared to cast Reality Slash, bugs fell from the sky one after the other. There were large transport insects with no combat ability. The objective of this action was simply to block Ainz's line of sight. Such a use would not be possible in Yggdrasil. Even so, Antoma though actually a doppelganger could use them in this way. Ainz gave thanks in his heart as he incanted a spell. Greater Teleportation. After teleporting into the air and avoiding the rain of bugs, Ainz cast Twin Maximize Magic, Reality Slash. Even if CZ had Ainz in his sights, the fact that her target had suddenly teleported into the air meant that she would lose him. After all, the weakness of the humanoid body was its inability to follow sudden up and down movement with the eyes. That said, if you were facing an experienced shooter like Proorensino, for example, they would be able to anticipate their opponent's movements, even in the vertical plane. Therefore, it was possible that one could not even escape with teleportation magic. Proorensino's sense aiming would have been like locking on to his target. CZ, you need to work hard to get on his level. As he basked in the nostalgia, Ainz shouted. Lupus out. Having to fight while keeping an eye on the HP of his opponents was very difficult. One could even call it a handicap. Therefore, if he was asked if Lupus's HP was really depleted, Ainz would not be able to reply with any confidence. Even so, he had to avoid any chance of killing Lupus because of the moment's carelessness. She's a doppelganger, so not only is she weaker than the original, but her HP isn't the same as the original Lupus. Alright, now that I've taken out the enemy's magic caster, it's time to be a real bastard. Perfect Unknowable. While there were ways to discover Ainz after he had cast Perfect Unknowable, without the aid of magic items, the only member of the Pleiades who could do it was Lupus, and the evil lord ought to be unable to detect him too. Therefore, it would probably be safe to say that they had no way to deal with this underhanded means of attack. Since I've taken out the enemy healer, I should go search for CZ. Don't tell me she's burning up consumable items. Personally, Ainz could not forgive wasting the wealth of Nazarick on a battle like this.